Maple Grove Estates looked like something out of a real estate magazine. Perfect lawns, coordinated mailboxes, and tasteful landscaping that followed the strict but reasonable homeowners association guidelines. That was what attracted me to purchase my home here 3 years ago. A quiet community with rules that maintained property values and created a sense of harmony. At least, that was what the realtor promised. I had renovated the 1990s colonial-style house into my dream home, hardwood floors throughout, a chef's kitchen with marble countertops, and floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room that looked out onto a meticulously maintained garden. The backyard featured a stone patio and pergola that I had designed myself. It was my sanctuary after long days working as a software developer, a place that was entirely mine. Everything changed 6 months ago when Karen Blackwell was elected HOA president. I first met her at the community meeting where she ran unopposed. She wore a crisp white pantsuit and spoke with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how things should be. Her campaign promises included stricter enforcement of community standards and harsher penalties for violations. Most neighbors seemed impressed by her business background and organizational skills. Within weeks of taking office, violation notices began appearing on doors throughout the neighborhood. My first came on a Tuesday morning, a yellow slip of paper noting that my garden hose was visible from the street, a violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA Covenant. I immediately coiled it and stored it in the garage. 3 days later, another notice arrived. This time, my garbage bins had been returned to the side of the house 6 hours after collection instead of the required 4. The third notice cited improper placement of my welcome mat, apparently 1 inch too far from the door according to HOA specifications. "Do not take it personally," my neighbor Tom whispered to me one morning as I retrieved another notice from my door. "She targets everyone at first to establish dominance. Eventually, she will move on to someone else if you comply quickly." I noticed, however, that certain homes never received notices despite obvious infractions. The Wilsons' basketball hoop remained in their driveway untouched. The Hendersons' unapproved wind chimes tinkled freely in the breeze. All homes belonging to Karen's close friends or those who had supported her election. One Saturday morning, I was pulling weeds when Karen approached, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 HOA board members who followed her everywhere like trained puppies. "Good morning. I see you have adjusted your garden bed border stones. Did you submit Form 32B for landscape modifications?" She smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "I just moved them back to their original position after the utility company work," I explained. "Nevertheless, all changes visible from the street require prior board approval. I will overlook it this time, but please follow proper channels in the future." She made a note on her clipboard before continuing her patrol. The following week at the neighborhood barbecue, I overheard Karen discussing her side business. The Thornfield wedding was $60,000, the Montgomery affair nearly $80,000. My specialty is finding unique, exclusive venues that no one else can offer. She spoke loudly enough to ensure everyone heard, punctuating her success with delicate sips of white wine. Later, Tom explained that Karen ran an elite wedding planning service catering to wealthy clients throughout the county. She brags that she can secure any venue, no matter how exclusive. He lowered his voice. "She charges premium prices for homes and locations that most planners cannot access." I nodded politely, never imagining how relevant this information would soon become. As I returned home that evening, I noticed Karen watching me from across the street, her gaze calculating as she studied my house. Something about that look made me uneasy, but I dismissed it as paranoia from our previous interactions. How tragically naive I was. The true nightmare had not even begun. My quarterly business trip to Chicago always followed the same routine: 3 days of meetings, client dinners, and hotel rooms. Before leaving, I meticulously secured my home. I locked every window, set the alarm system, and activated my recently installed security cameras that uploaded footage to cloud storage. The cameras were my response to a rash of package thefts in the neighborhood that Corinne had dismissed as exaggerated concerns. As my flight landed back at home, my phone buzzed with a message from my security system, noting multiple motion detections over the weekend. Not unusual, probably the mail carrier or neighborhood cats triggering the outdoor sensors. I drove through Maple Grove Estates, noticing how every lawn seemed unnaturally perfect, as if the community lived in constant fear of violation notices. The moment I stepped through my front door, something felt wrong. The air smelled different, a lingering scent of perfume I did not recognize. In the kitchen, my coffee mug sat on the counter instead of in the cabinet where I always stored it. The living room throw pillows were arranged differently, symmetrically placed rather than casually tossed as I preferred them. My heart pounded as I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. The timestamp menu showed multiple entries throughout Saturday afternoon. With shaking fingers, I tapped the first video. Corinne Blackwell stood at my front door, smartly dressed in a navy blazer, using what appeared to be a key to unlock my home. Behind her waited a couple, a tall man in an expensive suit and a beautiful woman in a cream-colored dress. They looked wealthy, important. "This property has exceptional potential for an intimate ceremony," Corinne said, swinging my door open as if she owned the place. "The homeowner has excellent taste. Notice the open-concept living area that flows to the garden, perfect for a spring wedding with 50 guests." I felt physically ill as I watched them enter my home. The footage continued as Corinne led them through my living room, pointing out features like a real estate agent. The staircase would make a dramatic entrance for the bride. She gestured to my oak staircase. And this living room could accommodate a small chamber orchestra in this corner. The woman nodded appreciatively, running her hand along my bookshelf. "The garden looks lovely. Could we see that?" The next video showed them in my private garden. The ceremony could take place under the pergola. White chairs arranged here, floral arrangements flanking the sides, Corinne explained, moving through my space as if it were a showroom. The couple asked detailed questions about catering access, guest bathrooms, and parking arrangements. Corinne answered everything confidently, never once indicating she lacked authority to offer my home. "The homeowner travels frequently for work," I heard Corinne explain. "The property is immaculate and perfect for exclusive events. I have special access as HOA president for community-approved functions." My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I forwarded through hours of footage showing Corinne leading the couple through every room of my house, even my bedroom, where she suggested the bride could prepare before the ceremony. The final video showed Corinne standing in my kitchen with the couple, pulling out what looked like a contract. "We require a 50% deposit to secure the date. Given the exclusivity of this venue, we anticipate high demand for spring weddings." The woman handed Corinne a check, which she placed in a leather portfolio. "Congratulations on securing one of our premier properties. I will contact you next week to discuss catering options and floral arrangements." After they left, Corinne remained behind. She moved through my living room adjusting small items, straightening a picture frame, examining books on my shelf. She opened my refrigerator, studied its contents, then took an apple before finally leaving, carefully locking the door behind her. I sat on my couch, trying to process what I had witnessed. This was not just trespassing. Corinne had used her position of authority to access my home without permission. She had presented my private residence as a venue for her business. She had taken money for use of my property without my knowledge or consent. The violation felt deeply personal, as if she had not just entered my home but had invaded my sense of security and autonomy. This was my sanctuary, the one place in the world that was entirely mine, and she had treated it as a commodity to be sold to strangers. I paced the room she had violated, touching surfaces and possessions that now felt contaminated by her presence. In my kitchen, I noticed the fruit bowl was one apple short, a small theft but somehow the most infuriating detail of all. That casual entitlement revealed the true extent of her belief that rules simply did not apply to her. With hands still shaking with rage, I called the non-emergency police line. The evidence was clear, the crime documented. Surely this would be the end of Corinne's reign of terror in our neighborhood. But as I would soon discover, finding justice would not be as straightforward as I had hoped. The morning after discovering the violation, I marched across the street to Corinne's house, security footage downloaded on my tablet. She opened the door wearing tennis clothes, her smile fading when she saw my expression. "We need to talk about you entering my home without permission this weekend," I stated, struggling to keep my voice level. Corinne blinked, momentarily startled before recovering her composure. "Oh, that. I was conducting a routine inspection as allowed under HOA regulations. Some neighbors expressed concerns about potential unauthorized modifications." I tapped my tablet screen, turning it toward her. "This does not look like an inspection. This shows you giving a tour to potential wedding clients and accepting a deposit for using my home as a venue." Her expression hardened. The HOA charter authorizes the board president to enter properties for community benefit assessment. As president, I have broad discretion to determine what constitutes community benefit. Selling access to my private property for your personal business is not a community benefit, I countered. Corinne crossed her arms. "Perhaps you misunderstand. The exposure your home receives through such events enhances neighborhood prestige, which benefits everyone. The modest referral fee I receive is standard practice in real estate circles. You collected money for use of my home without my consent. That is trespassing and fraud at minimum." Her smile turned condescending. "I do not think you want to pursue this. Section 47 of the bylaws grants immunity to board members acting in official capacity. Additionally, your rose bushes exceed the permitted height by 3 inches, and your garden edging uses unapproved materials. I have been overlooking these violations, but official enforcement would result in substantial fines." The threat was clear. Challenge her authority and she would make my life miserable through petty enforcement actions. Still, I was not about to back down. The next day, I attended the monthly HOA board meeting, tablet in hand. When the floor opened for community concerns, I stood and explained the situation, offering to show the video evidence. The 4 board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Vice President Richard Thompson cleared his throat. "While concerning if true, this sounds like a misunderstanding between you and President Blackwell. The board suggests handling this privately rather than consuming meeting time with personal disputes." "She used her position to illegally enter my home," I insisted. Corinne interrupted smoothly. "The board has previously authorized me to conduct property assessments as needed. I maintain all actions were within the scope of my authority. We should move on to the next agenda item." The matter was dismissed without discussion. The other board members avoided eye contact as I returned to my seat, humiliated and furious. My next step was legal counsel. Attorney Maria Gonzalez reviewed my evidence with growing concern. "This is clearly trespassing and potentially fraud," she confirmed. "However, pursuing it legally may be challenging. The HOA bylaws, which I see were substantially revised 3 years ago under Ms. Blackwell's influence, include unusual provisions granting the board extraordinary access rights and immunity from liability claims." She pointed to a clause buried deep in the document. "This stipulates that homeowners consent to property access for community enhancement activities at the board's discretion. It is legally questionable but would require expensive litigation to challenge." When I asked about criminal charges, Maria looked skeptical. "You can certainly file a police report, but in my experience, they typically view HOA matters as civil disputes." She was right. 2 police officers viewed my footage with sympathy but ultimately shook their heads. "This is definitely concerning, sir, but falls into a gray area between HOA authority and criminal trespass. Without clear evidence of breaking and entering or her admitting she lacked permission, this would be treated as a civil matter." One officer added quietly, "Between us, my brother had similar issues in his HOA. These organizations have surprising legal protection." Defeated but not ready to surrender, I began speaking with neighbors. Initially, most seemed reluctant to discuss Karen, but eventually Tom admitted. "She showed my house to a corporate retreat planner while I was on vacation last summer. I only found out because my teenage son came home early and caught them." "Why did you not report it?" I asked. "She threatened to enforce violations against my son's basketball hoop and revoke his parking permits. We cannot afford the fines, and he needs to park his car for work." As I spoke with more neighbors, a pattern emerged. Karen had been using her master key to access multiple homes, leveraging her position to silence complaints through threatened enforcement actions. The community lived under a reign of fear, with Karen wielding HOA regulations like a weapon. The system designed to protect our community had been corrupted to serve one person's greed and power. Traditional avenues of justice had failed. If I wanted to stop Karen, I would need to find another way. 3 evenings after discovering the violation, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw the elegant woman from the security footage, the prospective bride who had toured my home with Karen. My first instinct was anger. This woman was complicit in the violation of my privacy. I opened the door prepared to confront her. "Good evening. I believe you were in my home without permission last weekend," I stated coldly. She glanced around nervously. "May I come in? This conversation should not happen on your doorstep." Reluctantly, I stepped aside. Once inside, her demeanor changed completely. She reached into her purse and produced an official identification card. "My name is Agent Rebecca Morgan, Consumer Protection Bureau. I need to speak with you about Karen Blackwell," she said, her voice now crisp and professional rather than the soft, excited tone she had used when pretending to be a bride. I stared at her credentials, struggling to process this development. "You are not actually getting married." A small smile crossed her face. "No, I am investigating a pattern of complaints against Ms. Blackwell's wedding planning business. May we sit down? I have information that will interest you." In my living room, the same space where days earlier she had discussed flower arrangements with Karen, Agent Morgan opened a laptop. "For the past 8 months, our office has been building a case against Karen Blackwell for fraudulent business practices, trespassing, and misuse of her HOA position for financial gain. She has been securing venues without owner permission, collecting deposits for locations she has no right to offer, and when owners discover the deception or return unexpectedly, couples lose their deposits and venues. She showed me a spreadsheet listing over 20 complaints from couples who had paid Karen thousands of dollars for venues that fell through at the last minute. Another document detailed reports from homeowners in 4 different HOA communities who discovered their homes had been shown or used without consent. We have been trying to catch her in the act, but she is careful. She chooses victims who travel predictably and times her activities carefully. When confronted, she leverages HOA regulations to silence complaints. Agent Morgan leaned forward. Your security system documentation is the most comprehensive evidence we have obtained. However, to build a solid case that will prevent her from simply moving to another community and repeating this scheme, we need more. We need to document her completing a transaction and conducting business on a property she has no legal right to use. I realized where this was heading. You want to use my home as bait. She nodded. We propose a controlled operation. You would appear to leave town again. We would monitor your home with additional surveillance equipment. If Karen attempts to use your property again, we would document everything, allowing us to bring multiple charges against her. My first instinct was refusal. The violation still felt raw, and the idea of deliberately allowing Karen back into my home seemed unthinkable. I do not know. This sounds complicated and potentially risky for me legally. You would have full documentation that this was an authorized government operation. Your cooperation would be completely protected, Agent Morgan assured me. More importantly, you would be helping prevent other homeowners from experiencing similar violations. She showed me more case files. Elderly homeowners who returned to find strangers had been in their homes, a family whose heirloom items disappeared after an unauthorized viewing, a couple whose insurance was canceled after Karen's unauthorized event caused water damage. The pattern is clear. She identifies beautiful homes in HOA communities, gets herself elected to leadership positions, then exploits her authority for personal profit. When homeowners complain, she uses HOA regulations as both shield and weapon. Agent Morgan closed her laptop. I understand your hesitation. Being violated once is traumatic enough. Volunteering for a second invasion, even a controlled one, requires courage. But without definitive evidence of her conducting business transactions on properties without authorization, she will likely avoid serious consequences. I stared out my window at the quiet neighborhood street. Somewhere behind those perfect facades, other homeowners lived in fear of the woman who was supposed to protect our community standards. If we succeed, what happens to her? I asked. Multiple federal charges for fraud and misuse of position, likely civil suits from the couple she deceived. Her business would be finished, and she would be removed from the HOA board. I thought about Tom's teenage son, afraid to play basketball in his own driveway. I thought about the elderly couple down the street who received violations for their grandchildren's chalk drawings. I thought about my own sense of violation, discovering strangers had walked through my bedroom. What exactly would this operation involve? I asked. Agent Morgan smiled. Let me explain the plan. The following Monday, my home transformed into an operational headquarters. Agent Morgan arrived with 3 colleagues, all carrying equipment cases and technical gear. For the next several hours, they installed additional hidden cameras throughout my house, in air vents, bookshelves, even inside a hollowed-out decorative clock. Unlike my basic security system, These cameras captured both video and audio with remarkable clarity. "We need to document every word she says," explained a technician as he concealed a microphone in my kitchen light fixture. "Particularly any statements acknowledging she lacks permission to be here or any misrepresentations about her authority to offer your property." Agent Morgan walked me through the plan. "First, we need to create a believable reason for you to be away again so soon after your last trip, something that Karen would find credible and tempting." We decided on a fictional family emergency, my mother suffering a fall requiring my immediate assistance. This story would explain both my sudden departure and uncertain return date, creating the open-ended opportunity Karen would need. "Now we need to ensure she learns about your absence through seemingly natural channels," Agent Morgan continued. "Based on our investigation, she has cultivated information sources throughout the neighborhood. We need to feed her the bait through those channels." The next morning, I called Tom from my front yard, speaking loudly enough to be overheard by anyone passing by. "I have to fly out immediately. Mom fell and broke her hip. I do not know when I will be back. Could you collect my mail for the next week or so?" Later that day, I packed luggage visibly in my driveway, making sure to be seen by Karen's friend Linda, who power-walked by precisely at 3:00 p.m. every afternoon. I arranged for lights on timers and asked another neighbor to occasionally park in my driveway to collect imaginary packages. "Remember," Agent Morgan coached me via secure phone line from their monitoring location, "for this to work, Karen needs to believe you are gone but also uncertain about your return date. The risk creates urgency for her to act quickly." By Wednesday, the plan was fully operational. I relocated to a hotel across town, from which I could monitor the feeds from my home security system. Agent Morgan, now back in her role as the prospective bride, sent a follow-up inquiry to Karen about the beautiful home she had been shown. "The venue was perfect," she wrote in an email drafted by the agency's legal team. "My fiancé and I are hopping to finalize our decision this week, as other venues are filling up for spring dates." The bait was set, now we waited. The first nibble came Thursday afternoon. My security app alerted me to motion at my front door. The video showed Karen slowly driving past my house, clearly checking for signs of occupancy. She circled the block twice before leaving. Friday morning, Karen called Agent Morgan. Through the monitored phone line, I listened as she explained that the exclusive venue was unexpectedly available for a showing that weekend. "The owner is away indefinitely for a family emergency. This presents a perfect opportunity to finalize details and perhaps even reserve your date with a deposit." Agent Morgan played her role perfectly. "That is wonderful news. My fiancé is traveling this weekend, but I could bring my mother and wedding planner to see it again. Would Sunday work?" They settled on Sunday at 2:00 p.m. Karen suggested bringing a cashier's check if they wanted to secure the venue immediately. "Spring dates are booking quickly, and I cannot hold it without a deposit." The operation was proceeding exactly as planned, yet watching the video of Karen so confidently planning to invade my home again filled me with renewed anger. The calculating precision with which she exploited my absence revealed the predatory nature of her business model. Saturday night, Agent Morgan called to review final details. "Tomorrow, we will bring a full team posing as the wedding party. Each agent has specific surveillance responsibilities. You should remain at the hotel until I contact you." "What if she changes the plan? What if she suspects something?" I asked, anxiety building as the confrontation approached. We have contingencies for every scenario. The important thing is that you do not appear until we signal you. We need to document her completing the transaction on your property before intervening. That night, I barely slept. From my hotel room, I constantly checked the security feeds, watching for any sign of Karen conducting an early inspection. The house remained quiet, waiting like a theater set for the performance to begin. Sunday morning brought perfect weather, sunny and mild, ideal for showing a potential wedding venue. At precisely 1:45 p.m., my security system alerted me to movement at my front door. Karen arrived early, using her master key to enter my home. She moved efficiently through the rooms, adjusting curtains to optimize lighting, straightening furniture, and even bringing in flowers to place strategically throughout the space. From my hotel room, I watched this second violation of my home with a strange mix of anger and anticipation. This time, Karen's confident smile and proprietary movements through my space did not fill me with helpless rage, but rather with the calm certainty of justice approaching. The trap was set, the bait taken. Now we needed only to spring it at the perfect moment. Sunday afternoon unfolded like a carefully choreographed play. Through multiple camera angles, I watched Karen transform my home into a wedding showcase. She arrived with two assistants who carried floral arrangements, sample table settings, and promotional materials for her business. They arranged a display of photo albums showing previous weddings on my coffee table, set up a small altar under the living room window, and placed chair samples in a row to demonstrate ceremony seating. "The lighting in here is perfect for spring ceremonies," Karen told her assistants. "Make sure the flowers are arranged to catch the natural light from the bay window." At 2:05 p.m., Agent Morgan arrived with her team, 6 people posing as her mother, wedding planner, photographer, and various excited friends. In reality, each was a federal agent with specific surveillance assignments. Their hidden cameras and microphones created a comprehensive record of everything happening in my home. "Welcome to one of our premier properties," Karen greeted them warmly, offering champagne she had brought in a cooler. "As you can see, we have prepared a sample setup to help you envision your special day." The undercover agents moved through my home, asking detailed questions about capacity, electrical outlets for equipment, and catering access. Karen answered everything with absolute authority, never once indicating she lacked permission to offer the space. "The homeowner is away indefinitely dealing with a family medical situation," she explained when asked about potential date conflicts. "As HOA president, I have special arrangement authority for select properties in our exclusive community. This allows me to offer venues that ordinary wedding planners simply cannot access." Agent Morgan, playing her role perfectly, appeared increasingly excited. "It is even more beautiful than I remembered. The garden looks perfect for the ceremony, and the living room could easily accommodate our 70 guests for the reception." Karen beamed with professional pride. "We specialize in creating bespoke experiences in exclusive private residences. Our relationships with homeowners allow us access to properties not available on the commercial market." The deception was so smooth, so practiced, that even knowing the truth, I found her performance almost convincing. She spoke with such confidence about her arrangement with me that an ordinary client would never question her authority. After touring the property again, Karen guided the group to my dining room where she had set up a makeshift office. She opened a leather portfolio containing contracts and payment schedules. "To secure this venue for your May wedding, we require a 50% deposit today. The remainder would be due 30 days before the event, along with a security deposit that is refundable after inspection." She named a figure that made me gasp: $25,000 for a single day's use of my home. The contract she presented listed her company as the venue provider with no mention of the actual homeowner. A clause buried in the fine print stated that deposits were non-refundable if the client cancels for any reason. Agent Morgan examined the paperwork carefully. Everything looks in order. I brought the cashier's check as you suggested. She removed an official-looking check from her purse. Excellent. With your deposit, I can block the date immediately. We should discuss catering options as well. Our preferred vendors know the property and can work seamlessly with the kitchen layout. As Karen accepted the check and began countersigning the contract, Agent Morgan gave a subtle hand signal to her team. One agent positioned himself near the front door, while two others moved to block the rear exit. The photographer, actually the operations supervisor, touched his earpiece briefly before nodding to Agent Morgan. My phone buzzed with a text message: "Approach the house now." Heart pounding, I drove the short distance from my hotel to my home. Two unmarked government vehicles followed discreetly behind me. As I approached my driveway, I saw several more agents waiting out of sight. The front door of my home opened at my touch. I stepped into my foyer, followed by uniformed officers and Agent Morgan's supervisor. Karen was still at my dining room table, the incriminating check and contract spread before her. For one frozen moment, Karen continued smiling, not processing the sudden change in atmosphere. Then recognition dawned in her eyes as she saw me. The color drained from her face. "What are you doing in my home, Karen?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Karen's professional composure cracked. She stood abruptly, sending her chair scraping across the hardwood floor. "This is not what it looks like. I was conducting an HOA-approved demonstration of community features for potential residents." Agent Morgan stepped forward, her bride persona completely gone. She held up her credentials. "Karen Blackwell, I am Agent Rebecca Morgan with the Consumer Protection Bureau. We have documented you entering this property without the owner's permission, falsely representing yourself as authorized to offer it as a venue, and accepting payment for services you have no legal right to provide." Karen's eyes darted around the room, suddenly realizing that everyone present, the photographer capturing her reaction, the mother dabbing non-existent tears, the wedding planner taking notes, were all agents. Even her own assistant stepped back, clearly wanting to distance themselves. "This is a misunderstanding," Karen insisted, her voice rising. "As HOA president, I have broad authority to showcase community properties. The owner and I have an arrangement." I stepped forward. "We have no such arrangement. You used your HOA position to illegally enter my home and attempt to rent it without my knowledge or consent." A police officer approached Karen with handcuffs. "Ms. Blackwell, you are under arrest for criminal trespass, fraud, and misuse of position." "This is ridiculous," Karen protested as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I have immunity under Section 47 of the HOA bylaws. You cannot arrest me for performing my duties." The officer continued reading her rights while Karen's carefully constructed world collapsed around her. As she was led past me toward the door, her final defense crumbled into a personal attack. "Your garden violates 3 separate covenants," she hissed. "I was doing you a favor by not issuing citations." Agent Morgan placed a hand on my shoulder as Karen was escorted to a waiting police car. "It is over. We have everything we need. Her operation ends today." Through my front window, I watched the woman who had terrorized our neighborhood being placed in the back of a police vehicle. The curtains in neighboring houses twitched as word spread rapidly through Maple Grove estates. Our community tyrant had finally fallen, taken down by her own greed and sense of untouchable authority. The legal consequences for Corinne unfolded rapidly in the weeks following her arrest. The evidence against her was overwhelming, not just from our sting operation, but from previous victims who came forward once they knew she had been caught. The district attorney filed multiple charges: criminal trespass, fraud, misuse of position, operating a business without proper licensing, and tax evasion for unreported income from her scheme. Local news cameras captured Corinne leaving the courthouse after her arraignment, her previously immaculate appearance now disheveled, her confident stride replaced by defeated shuffling. The story made headlines throughout the county. HOA president arrested for selling access to homes without permission. The investigation revealed the true scope of her operation. For nearly 4 years, Corinne had used her positions in various homeowners associations to access properties while owners were away. She had collected tens of thousands of dollars in deposits for unauthorized venues. When homeowners returned unexpectedly or discovered her scheme, she used HOA rules and the threat of costly violations to silence complaints. 3 weeks after her arrest, an emergency meeting was called at the Maple Grove Estates Community Center. The room was packed with homeowners eager to discuss recent events and the future of our neighborhood governance. Richard Thompson, the former vice president, stood nervously before the crowd. In light of recent events, the entire board has submitted resignations effective immediately. We failed in our oversight responsibilities and apologize for the harm caused under our watch. One by one, residents stood to share their experiences with Corinne's reign of terror. An elderly couple described receiving violation notices for their grandchildren's chalk drawings on their private patio. A single mother recounted being fined when her holiday decorations remained up one day past the removal deadline because she was working a double shift. Tom finally spoke publicly about Corinne using his home for corporate event showings. The meeting lasted for hours as years of suppressed grievances poured forth. By the end, a committee was formed to draft a new HOA charter with strict protections against abuse of power, including term limits for board positions, transparent enforcement procedures, and explicit privacy guarantees for homeowners. I found myself nominated to serve on this reform committee. Initially reluctant, I accepted after realizing that positive change requires engaged participation, not just criticism from the sidelines. Our first action was commissioning an independent audit of HOA finances under Corinne's leadership, which uncovered further misappropriation of community funds. The legal process continued through summer and into fall. Corinne eventually accepted a plea deal rather than face trial with its overwhelming evidence. She received probation, community service, and orders to pay substantial restitution to her victims. More significantly, she was barred from serving in any HOA leadership capacity or operating a wedding planning business in the future. As the seasons changed, so did our neighborhood. The suffocating atmosphere of surveillance and judgment gradually lifted. Gardens became more personalized as people felt safe to express individuality within reasonable boundaries. Children played freely in driveways without parents fearfully watching for patrolling board members. Neighbors who had avoided each other for fear of being reported for violations began connecting again. 6 months after Corinne's arrest, I hosted a neighborhood gathering in my backyard, the same space she had once offered to strangers as a wedding venue. Under the pergola where she had envisioned charging thousands for ceremonies, neighbors now mingled freely, sharing stories and rebuilding connections. Tom approached me with a glass of lemonade. I never properly thanked you for having the courage to stand up to her. The rest of us were too afraid of retaliation. I had help, I reminded him. Sometimes justice requires partnership. As twilight settled over Maple Grove Estates, I reflected on how our community had transformed. The new HOA board, elected through